We are lighting the candle, a world that works. And I'm Bill Correll, and I've been Bill Correll now for a little over 70 years. Uh, I have got my dear friend, Jan Jeremias, who uh, I just am blessed to have you in my life, Jan. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about some things that you've brought into my life. I feel very special that you put together that wonderful presentation that we had. I think it was yesterday with Hans.
Yeah.
Uh, but just a little bit of background for folks. Both of us are we're committed to making the world a better place. I think Jan is a highly trained uh, humanist slash, I would say, someone who knows an awful lot about nutrition and supplements and the kinds of things that are really good for your body that we don't hear much about on a daily basis. And if we do hear about them, it's usually coming from somebody at an MLM meeting or something like that. And it doesn't mean that they're not the best things ever, because I was kind of really empowered to hear that Hans said that he's been hooked up with New Skin since 1992. And guess who else was a New Skin distributor in 1992? Because all my friends were doing it. So where this is kind of heading in my world is that being 70, I am relatively graced with good health. I have two issues that my body is dealing with, and one of them is I was diagnosed with aged macular degeneration about 9 years ago. And so, it was something to keep an eye on. And, my doctor that did my cataract operations took note of what things looked like at that point. And that was almost 7 years ago. I still have great vision as a result of that, and which is kind of unique also. But the other thing that I've got is I've got skin cancers, which basically tells me that part of my body that is not dealing well with inflammation is getting rid of it in this fashion. Okay, so I'm a candidate for a lot of different things with regard to well care. And I'm also a newbie when it comes to what specifically can I be doing to, increase my possibilities with both of these things. And don't ever hear me you ought to feel sorry for me because I have to go in and have frequent operations, usually a couple times a year. Sometimes I go 2 or 3 visits, a year and a half or so, and I have maybe a half dozen biopsies and nothing. Okay, so that's perfect when it comes back benign. So I'm saying a lot of words to say that I thought that the time that we spent with Hans reviewing a recording of Dr. Nolan from Ireland and the work that he's doing on macular degeneration, and then also that's kind of like grown into his interest and partnership with some other scientists having to do with Alzheimer's.
Hmm.
So, guess what? At my age, I know you're a lot younger than I am, but at my age, I know a lot of people that are dealing with these two scourges, and losing. They're not doing well. So anything I think that we can do to make people aware of what they can do for their own health is probably a good thing. What do you think?
No, absolutely. It's like my mission in life is to empower people with tools that they can use and that they can do to make their lives better. And are there any guarantees? No. And I can't probably give, I could quote statistics possibly of, better outcomes, but is there a guarantee? No, but there's never a guarantee for no matter what we do.
Right.
And my attitude is that I'd rather do everything I can and know that I did everything I could. So that if it does, it kind of makes me feel that if something happens or in dealing with something, I'm better fortified and better able. And then also, at least if it didn't work, I know that I did everything I could have done. because I think the worst is like when you go back and you have regrets, thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, maybe if I had done this,
Yes.
it would have been better. And then it's too late, you
Yeah.
know? And so it's just like to know that about, to think to yourself, is it a worthwhile investment either of my time and and educating myself, or is it a worthwhile investment financially to actually start thinking about these things? Because the opposite is not good, so
I can tell you that the dashboard lights were on early in my life with regard to both smoking and obesity. Okay, so I quit smoking when I was 28 years old, which is now 42 years ago. It's hard to believe, but so that's good on me. That was something that I did that was taking a stand for my future health. And I can't say enough, having gone through the loss of over a dozen uh, loved ones and dear friends who all died of emphysema and you know uh, cancer in the lungs, but also in many other places. It's a horrible way to die, not being able to breathe. And I just want to say that if you're at a position in your life where you can give it up, I have a dear friend who stopped smoking now about 4 years ago. She was diagnosed COPD and, like a stage four uh, deal in her lungs, and she's turned it around, and they gave her a year. And I'm so pleased that she took a stand for herself. And at her age, we graduated from high school together. And at her age, she said, I really got to listen now, and she went crazy on nutrition and all the other things that we're going to talk about a little bit. It made a difference. So guess what? When they tell you that it's too late, it never is. Okay, you be that person. Okay, be the one who gets to hang out for a lot more years than they give you credit for. So in terms of what my eyes were opened up to, I spent a little bit more time downloading some of the papers because Dr. Nolan is a prolific writer in terms of all of his studies that he's done. And I appreciate that. And I also appreciate that I've been around this sort of thing and did a little bit of college work with chemistry and science and engineering myself, so that these were not completely foreign concepts to me. So I could actually pick up the general gist of it. But when it comes right down to it, um, when we look at the overall health of our body, and we were talking about four different measures that we could do to look to see whether these um, carotidins or carotids or whichever they are, but the
carotenoids.
carotenoids, yeah, the noids. You got to watch out for the noids. So sounds like a Animal House movie or something, right? Revenge of the Noids. So so here we are, at whatever age we are. I don't know how old you are when you're listening to this, but take on board for a moment that it's not hard to find out how your health is. And can you talk to us a little bit, Jan, about the different ways that we can measure the level of these really crucial, nutrients in your body?
Yeah, so they're antioxidants is what they are. So they prevent, they're preventing our I would say they're preventing our rusting process as we age. They can be measured in the blood, so you could ask your doctor to have your carotenoid levels tested via blood. There are some very, very advanced technologies in the ophthalmology world that they can actually measure the carotenoids in your eye, in your retina. But then there also is non-invasive skin carotenoid testing. So basically, they measure the level of these antioxidants in the dermal layer, one of the layers of the skin of your hand, and it takes about 30 seconds. And from the research by Dr. Nolan and others, it's been shown that they're mirrored. So whatever's in your blood is going to be the same in your hand, which is going to be, similar, like what's in your eye. And now his most recent, work has been the same amount as in your brain. And so, um, yeah, which is I just love to, first of all, I love to know, and I don't mind being transparent in this, on this platform. When I first measured, I was really low and I was really kind of shocked
Right.
for whatever reason. That could be the amounts of foods that you need to take in, to maintain optimum levels, the portion sizes, things like that. And then could have been some other health issues that I have, which was preventing absorption of nutrients once I ate them.
Right.
And because I lead a pretty healthy lifestyle. So it wasn't like I would have per se assumed that I had any risk factors for having low levels. So one thing, I'll just clarify. So where do we get them? We get them from the colorful pigments in fruits and vegetables. It's really where they come from. Things like the colored peppers and tomatoes and carrots. We all know that it's the old adage, eat a carrot if you want to see well, kind of thing. Carrots are good for your eyes. And then there are certain things that do lower your levels, like things that cause a lot of oxidative stress, like smoking and other stresses, radiation exposure, sun exposure, things like that, which can increase your cost, let's say, of life.
Yes. Yeah, and I really like the notion that these carotenoids are kind of like the sunglasses for your body, really. And the neat thing too is a little bit of the work that I've done in terms of investigating this is that inflammation and the propensity for having some kind of a cancerous presence in your body, it's all the same thing. It's the same kind of illness. It just is a different tissue, and it kind of presents in a slightly different way, but it is all your body fighting inflammation in the way that it knows best how to do it. And unfortunately, it doesn't know when to stop. So that's one of the really cool things here is it turns out that if you can put these sunglasses on, especially at an early age, and kind of do this for your lifetime, you're really giving yourself an insurance policy, and not necessarily one like we were saying before. It's not a guarantee because no matter what kind of physical condition you're in, you could still get hit by the big yellow bus. So, and that's the metaphor for anything else that you can't plan for. So, in the meantime, Jan, I don't know about you, but when I first started looking into vitamins, uh, probably back in my 20s, and I went in for a physical, and I asked my doctor, and he was an older man, and he was a smoker, and all the rest of that stuff. And he said, "Well, Bill, you can take vitamins," he said, "but you're just going to have expensive pee." And that's so when he said that to me, I said, "Is that it?" And he said, "Yeah." He says, "There's really no clinical evidence right now that vitamins are going to do much of anything for you because we're talking about that was in the 1970s." And of course, there's a lot more evidence today about what nutritional supplements will do for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think yeah, I never grew up taking supplements ever. I mean,
Right.
my pediatrician didn't really believe in vitamins. He was like, if they eat well, you don't need to take supplements or vitamins. Um, I think that the degradation of our soil and other things has caused the food to be really depleted, that and mass production. Dr. Nolan said something interesting in his talk the other day, the second talk, and that was basically in the mass production of food and basically trying to make food hardy. One of the
Yep.
things that carotenoids do in plants is they actually protect the plant. And because they're mass producing, they actually produce less carotenoids because they don't need them, because we've kind of altered their, let's say, their growth cycle to
Yes.
optimize that. And so in doing so, we've actually decreased the level of carotenoids that they actually have. Now, the few things that I just want to say there, we do not make these natural pigments or chemicals ourselves. The only way to get them is through our diet or through supplementation. So it's not like your body is just going to make them. It's not, they don't. We get them from our diet, eating lots of colorful fruits and vegetables, and like taking out a lot of the other things which I think are harmful, like processed foods and excess salt and sugar and all this other, harmful fats, all this kind of stuff. But and then supplements that have them, because that's the only way to get them is through our diet or through consuming them in some way.
Yes.
Now, that being said, I did say that I scored really low, and some of that might be due to the food that we're getting now and the fact that, you know, we'd have to consume. I mean, I don't know what the recommendation is now, 8 to 12 servings of vegetables a day. And I don't know that many people that eat that many. Um, if anybody, and I'm a vegan, and I don't think I get 8 to 12 servings. Maybe if I juiced, I would get more.
Sure.
You know, it's also bioavailable, so it's really easily absorbed when you juice. But I almost feel like we're forced to supplement these days because of the food sources. And the fact is that if we were to think of 8 to 12 servings of, let's say preferred would be organic. So organic, non-genetically modified fruits and vegetables,
Right.
we would probably not be able to afford it. I mean, to be honest, if you sit there and you buy organic fruits and vegetables, like you probably 8 to 12 servings, and that's only you. That's not counting your family or your children or anybody else in your household. Very few households would be able to afford that.
Yeah, you're easily going to be talking several $100s a week,
Yeah,
for the level of consumption. And then here's the other thing: you can't eat that much.
right,
It,
exactly.
it's physically impossible to conserve, to consume that amount of anything. So
Right, right.
what's left is finding something else that's got a high bioavailability with, probably fat soluble more than water soluble, because I think the water soluble is harder for your body to absorb that than it would be with fat. And maybe you can say something about that.
Um, well, I can tell you that, for example, carotenoids are what, we like to think them as like greasy micronutrients in the fact that they need fat to be absorbed,
Yes.
and they need healthy fats to kind of navigate them through the body, be resistant to degradation, and then be able to be easily absorbed.
Yep.
Now, um, so the I don't know that it's just, yeah. So maybe rephrase the question again so I can just get a better grasp of how I want
I
to
think,
answer it.
I think you actually meant, by calling them, greasy, that more or less tells you that that is the best way to get it into your body and then make it available to your cells, and probably to
Right.
make it persist in the bloodstream more than something that was water based or water carried.
Yeah. I mean, I would think so. And I think that in and the fact that, we have to make sure that they're going to be able to withstand the conditions, let's say, of um certain, if we take in food through our if we take in food, it goes through our stomach and all the stomach acid, and it has to be and goes down into like whatever the lower intestine, and then starts to be and is absorbed, and you have to make sure that it's going to be viable by the time it gets there.
Yes.
And so we do need to protect it in some way so that when it does enter the bloodstream, it's now able to then be distributed to all the parts that it goes to. Um, and so that's a pretty amazing, like, to me the body is pretty amazing in the fact that it has the ability to do that,
Sure.
that it can go through and and there was a beautiful slide that he showed, and Dr. Nolan showed in this past presentation last week. And basically, it was, the amount of carotenoids that occur in nature. And I'm just pulling up right now the exact number because I was hopefully here. Um, so let me see if I wrote it down because I was like, I always write down that one thing because I always think it's amazing. Basically, let's say there are hundreds that are in nature. We take in about 50 and we congregate, or three carotenoids end up in our eye, and then three, or maybe those three also end up in the brain, and maybe a few more.
Right.
So it's like, the narrowing down that our body has, um just have our body and its brilliance is kind of, and it really is brilliant. I always say that inherent nature of the body is pretty amazing. The fact that there are all these in nature, and we've taken down all the level to have the three that congregate in the eye, that protect the eye, that are the sunscreen for the eye and for the body. And then amongst all the ones that occur, like, it's pretty amazing that, that's how evolution has kind of done that.
Yeah, we're the ones that are left, right?
Hmm.
The rest of the clan's not here anymore because they couldn't do this. But what's remarkable to me though is, and again, I'm a lay person who hasn't really been involved with this conversation. I'm learning so much on a whole bunch of different fronts, but um, I would think that there would be somebody out there. I mean, other than MLMers, okay. Let's put that aside for a moment. Where are the nutritionalists, that would be at the level that people would listen to, like they would listen to an Anthony Fauci? Okay, good, bad, or indifferent. The man speaks, and then people take note. Sometimes he knows what he's talking about. Sometimes he gets into areas where maybe not so much. But the point is, I'm not aware of people who are carrying the banner for antioxidants to be. I mean, and seriously, that's something I've been aware of now for 10 or 15 years, and it's made a huge difference in my life.
Yeah, I don't, I, where are they is a good question. Um, I think part of the issue lies in the lack of, I want to say, formal education or lack of education, um, in nutrition in medicine,
Yes.
or traditional medicine. I think that's one issue is, and this is, and I'm not a doctor, but this is from my friends and from people who I know who are in the medical world, who talked to me and mentioned to me how little education they got on nutrition. And I'm
Yes.
not saying that's across the board. That's coming from people who actually shared that with me. So I don't want to make any general assumptions, but from what I've heard, that education is very limited. And that some of, like everything changes, in the world, and in science especially. Things that people believed last week are not necessarily applicable now, because a study comes out and all of a sudden that's been disproved, and that's not bad. It's just the way science is. It's like you learn something, and hopefully you take it and it expands, or that's what you hope it is. Let's just say. And so,
That the people who are proclaiming a scientific study are actually truthful and not charlatans.
right, right. And so when you go and you look at some of the more current information out there on certain, let's say, nutrients, which were kind of downplayed because they were, for whatever reason, um, then all of a sudden, I don't think the more traditional medical world is up to date on certain information regarding nutrition.
Right.
And some of the old ideas about nutrition, are still kind of, I want to see, are still the message that's being sent.
Yeah.
Um, And so it's where are they? I think there are some people out there, but for whatever reason that their voice is not given enough volume, let's say to so to speak, for whatever reason that might be, whether it's like industry determined, whether it's yeah, they don't have the same, they're not getting the same voice time, let's just
Well,
say airtime.
one of the most effective advertising campaigns that I recall had to do with glacial uh, glacial milk, okay, which contained all of these metals and nutritional elements that are not found anywhere else. Back in the day, the headline was "Dead Doctors Don't Lie." And what the premise was, at that time they were saying that the average life expectancy for a doctor is like 57 years, and this is back around the turn of the century, 2004, 2005, and that our life expectancy of the general population was like 85 or something at that point. So if you listen to a doctor about what's good for you in terms of ongoing health, they're not good at that. They're only good at fixing broken things. And so in order for you to get into that preventive kind of general all-encompassing care that nobody else seems to know about, you're going to have to study different things. And I think there's been a disincentive, with especially with insurance companies and the federal government getting involved with it to the degree that they are right now. They talk a good game with preventive care and preventive this and all, but no, they're not interested in you being healthy. They're only interested in exchanging transactional dollars one way or the other when you're not. And so as more people are not, it puts a strain on all the systems that we have to work with. And it just doesn't seem like, they would be all that interested in spending money, first of all, to prove, that once and for all, these are the kinds of things that we should start at an early age and just keep them up all of our life. And it might be just a little bit more than expensive pee. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And the I think some of it comes from, let's say, the doctors in the sick care world that are let's say more holistic. I want to say, well, holistically inclined in the fact that they look at the body like a system,
Yep.
not in isolation of different systems. that, and in that way, I mean holistic, like the whole body as a whole versus, natural. That's how I want to preface what I'm going to say. And it's their frustration, even within their own system, is the fact that they, when they do believe in something that may be much more nutritionally based and much more supplement based is having an impact, then and they are basically, quashed and then become frustrated, or they're fearful because they're afraid that, they work in a very, as my friend, a friend of ours, Hans, and myself always says, who's a professor at Harvard, the industrial medical complex.
Yes.
And they have to conform in a certain way if they want to maintain their connection to that system.
Yes, and it's not just a maverick firebrand who gets disconnected and writes a bestseller. Um, there are some really brilliant people out there who have kind of gone undercover uh, to really investigate Eastern philosophies with regard to acupressure, acupuncture, Ayurvedic medicine, which comes, from Indian, philosophies going all the way back to the ancient Chinese, and just different nutritional things that they figured out how to do 5, 10,000 years ago that they're just not around all that much anymore, unless you happen to go to those places and and investigate what they're up to. And they're not fringe, like woo woo 1970s hippie things anymore. These are like, there's science behind this. And it, again, even those practices have withstood the test of time. So just as we are the beings that need these carotenoids and have figured out how to use them to our benefit, so have those medical practices, by and large.
Yeah, I mean, I think they have been around for thousands of years. And yes, it is kind of nice being the scientist when something that's been around for thousands of years, they finally understand why.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh, they prove it. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's why. I remember years ago, just as an example, I remember years ago having someone who came to me for about their cat because I work with people and their animals, and the cat had a history of urinary tract infections. And in passing, the woman says to me, but so do I. And she said to me, do you think it's connected? And at the time, I didn't laugh, but it made me think. And I thought to myself, well, energetically, could it be something? They live in the same house. Could it be somehow like stress related? And then years later, reading an article about the fact that, you know, animals and people that live in the same household can share similar microbiomes. And I thought to myself, oh, there we are. There's the connection, but that came like probably 15 years after I met this woman. And I
Yes.
knew there was probably some sort of connection. If you would have asked me what it was, I wouldn't have been able to tell you, but it just seemed I had heard too many circumstances like that with too many different people to think it was a coincidence. Because I don't really think anything's a coincidence. I think that, I think we just don't know the reason yet. And so I sat there and I was like, "Oh, now I get it. Now I understand why that was happening."
Yeah.
And and
And, and
it made me think of my own because I remember my first dog had inflammatory bowel, and then I had a cat with inflammatory bowel, and then Tonka now has inflammatory bowel and has had since he was like young. And at first, when I first had my cat after I'd had my dog, I thought to myself, well, the universe sent me a pet that had it because they knew I knew what to do. Well, now after the third pet, I have to consider like maybe it's something environmental, maybe it's something, something else, but it's not coincidence. Sorry. Go ahead, Bill.
I was going to violently agree with you, that, and there's also a nonverbal, metaphysical as well as a, mental connection between us and our animals. And as couples who have been together for a long time don't necessarily have to speak in order for communication to occur. It's the same thing with animals.
Hmm.
Uh, Especially if you've had an animal for a dozen, 15 years and you really are in sync with each other. Sometimes all you have to do is give a look and, or, maybe even a nonverbal message. Um, but back to the thought of when you finally do hear oh, that's how that works. And had you had an open mind to begin with, not you in particular, but the medical community, the nutritional community, if they had basically sat down and say, let's let's plot this out, in an ideal situation, how are we going to introduce the right kind of nutrition into the human body and to the animal bodies as well. And then finally somebody comes up with the idea, processed food may not be our most enlightened way to go. Turns out it's not good for animals either. So
Not at all. And it's yeah, it's sort of like maybe it isn't the way to go. And I think what's sad to me is I'm on a lot with people internationally all over, and hopefully some of our community who are listening also are all over, and
yes,
how that sort of like I want to call it the invasive weed almost. The invasive weed of processed food has now kind of crept its way into the more global into the globe, which
yes,
let's say it was always pretty much concentrated in certain areas. And that makes me really sad. Now, that being said, I do have friends who, well, let's say have limitations in diet, who travel, who can eat anything they want, just when they're not outside of their normal, like most of those people are from the US. And so when they travel abroad, they can eat, a lot easier. They don't have to be as careful for whatever, reason, lack of processing, lack of pesticides, whatever that be. Um, and so it does make me question and really look at what I start to put in my body, let alone, and now, and I'll be the first one to tell people, you have to eat well. There's no substitution. You don't want to eat. Always tell people you can't eat junk and then take a supplement and hope it's going to help. Like, I mean, it's just not going to, I mean, it probably wouldn't hurt, but it's probably not going to be as much as impactful as if you were to take and, change your diet and take supplements. Like, I have people who say that to me all the time. Like, well, if I take this, can I like still eat this? And I'm like, well, I mean, it's kind of like, well, yeah, if you think about cleaning up, like some of that is cleaning up some of the stuff you're taking in, then it's really busy taking in stuff that you like cleaning up stuff you're consuming on a normal basis versus trying to clean up stuff maybe that's been there a while.
Exactly. So I mean, we've all been at one of the fast food restaurants. I mean, back in the day when I used to go, where there'd be somebody, a very very large human being that would say, "I would like to have the double fries. I would like to have the triple Whopper." And two apple pies. Let me see. And can you supersize that? And oh, by the way, how about a Diet Coke?
Yeah, I know, right. I was a Diet Coke person for years.
Well, talk about messing your body up. Holy moly,
I mean, I was talking to a friend of mine not too long ago, and I was saying that, it's so interesting because I remember my aunt was my great aunt, so was diabetic. And I don't know. So I was a kid. I mean, she was my great aunt. She lived with my grandmother. They were sisters. And she had diabetes, and my mother would buy all these special foods for when she came to visit. So there was like sugar-free jam and like all that, like, and at that time, saccharin,
Yep.
little white tablets and everything, and some diet sodas that had come out or whatever. And my mother would be very, very clear that we were not allowed to take that. That wasn't meant for us. That was meant for her because she had this health issue, but it was really only for her. And it was very targeted toward a particular group of people, not being negative and not being separatist, that required like how to watch their sugar, and therefore, she would use these things. And then all of a sudden it became much more acceptable for people to just use it because they wanted to consume less sugar. Less sugar. Now it's more, other forms of sugar, and not like, you know, crystallized sugar. It's much more like corn syrup and everything these days, but which is still
Wow.
sugar.
Yeah, it turns out that white cane sugar, which is much more expensive than corn syrup, is good for you. Okay.
It's probably, yeah,
So,
exactly. You
not to
know,
mention it tastes a lot better, than corn syrup as well. All you have to do is to get like some Mexican 7 Up or something like
but that,
that.
no, exactly. I always say that all you have to do is travel abroad and have a soda, and you'll
Yeah,
taste the
sure.
difference. It's
Yeah,
very different. And so, but at that time, I mean, it was really clear like this is not for everybody else because it's not something you're healthy, you don't need it. And then all of a sudden, there was this huge transition into all those foods being consumed by the general population.
right.
And, with all their various chemicals and, you know, and what I would say, some of the other things that were negative, I don't want to, you could say side effects that, come, or ill health benefits of, you know, that came with, let's say, prolonged consumption,
Yeah.
and then probably an increase in amounts of consumption, over time, more people, like I said, I drank diet soda for years.
Well, here's what I recall, and I just remember we went through some goofy years in terms of certain things being removed from the shelves. Red dye number 7, it's like, and then you go and you read this study that rats who had been fed quantities of ounces per day for a month had developed tumors. Okay. And it's like, huh? You have trace amounts of red dye number 7, in things that people would not consume ounces of in a year. So, well, the long and the short of it is we got really goofy on some things, but we had just as bad aspartame studies, and that they not only proved that it was bad for animals, but they proved it was bad in children too. So that never got uh you know that never got banned or removed. It's like, who's paying the most money to get their products listed in that triangle, from the federal government. And then when you start to see that Battle Creek, Michigan, and the money that they pay to get their frosted flakes and these other things listed as if they're good for children, it's like, what? Holy mackerel. It's all a charade. There is no integrity to this stuff at all, and it's so sad.
It's really sad, and I get really sad when I think about children, because I think that one is their brains are developing. They're there's all this potential and creativity and all that, and their brains are so malleable, and anything that limits that to me is like, is almost is a crime, because we
Yes.
shouldn't be wanting we should be wanting to fortify and nurture that versus do anything that might affect it negatively. So that's one thing. And then, like you said, I mean, they fortify them with vitamins and minerals. And that's how they kind of, I think, get by with the fact that, well, it has vitamin D and it has vitamin B and it has this and this. And you're like, okay, well, I'm giving my kid a whole bunch of vitamins, but you're also giving your kids a whole lot of sugar and carbs, which are, form into sugar. I mean, and don't
Well,
get me wrong, I grew up on cereal. I love cereal. I still love cereal. It's a great snack. I remember we'd come home from school. My mother would, we'd have a bowl of cereal because dinner wouldn't be for hours or something. And so don't get me wrong, I loved it. But that doesn't mean that it was the wisest of choices. Plus, food was quite different then.
well, it really was. And the other part of it is that, so you've got these added vitamins. Let's go take a minute and look at what it actually is. There's nothing about it that makes it bioavailable. There's nothing about it that makes it absorbative. And quite frankly, just having it on the box, and if you look at where it is in the list of ingredients, where vitamin A and vitamin D and vitamin K and all that kind of stuff, they're at the bottom. I mean, it's there, but what percentage of a daily requirement is it? It's like 0.02%, but you can say it's got all the vitamins you need, right?
Right, right. And then by the time it's processed, which is the other thing, is that how viable are those nutrients? Like, are they bioactive, meaning that they go in the body and they have some sort of influence? Their levels are low, and by the time you take them in and you go through all that digestive process, there is the potential that it's going to have any impact is quite low.
Right.
And there are certain things I learned along the way, um which I still carry from years and years ago. I remember um reading and being told that, the amount of calories, let's say, in a half a cup of orange juice versus an orange. And I remember at the time, we used to drink orange juice every morning, some sort of
Right.
juice, orange juice, grapefruit juice, but some sort of juice we would drink in the morning every day before we went to school. And afterwards, learning, well, an orange is the same thing And so to me, I thought to myself, well, I'd much rather eat an orange because that's a lot more satisfying. And let alone you get the fiber and you get some other things, along the way versus have a half a cup of juice, which lasts about 5 seconds if you don't drink it, if you don't drink it slowly. And thought to myself, well, it's a lot more satisfying to eat an apple versus have a half a cup of apple juice. And it's a
Yes.
lot more satisfying to eat an orange than it is, or a half a grapefruit than it is to have a half a cup of juice. So I really basically, not that I didn't drink juice, but I became much more apt to have a piece of fruit versus drink the juice of that fruit, let alone the fact that it was probably pasteurized, and therefore I don't know how much, what the nutrient content was anyway, years later learning about that kind of stuff. But I became much more aware of things like that. Like I would much rather eat a piece of fruit or eat a vegetable and have it have all the fiber and get all the natural ingredients that have not only the vitamins, and go that way versus, you know, something that's a lot less. That's why I could never like purely live on liquids, because I think that we need to chew and we need to eat.
There's another element to it too, and that has to do with caloric density. Okay. And essentially, when you eat a whole pear or a whole apple or a whole orange, you're consuming somewhere between 90 and 120 calories. Okay.
Right.
And you're getting a cross section, as you mentioned, with some fiber in there and some things that require some digestion. But to get that 100 calories in juice, we're talking 2 ounces.
Right. Exactly.
That ain't staying with you. Okay. And a lot of that is sugar. So
That's
sorry.
right.
Yeah.
Sorry. Right. That's sugar and, obviously like water or any, and then, which I'm not saying you need water to hydrate, but it just seemed like it was, was so much more satisfying. And like you said, I mean, the fiber actually slows, like, fiber is really good for digestion. And so we need all that, especially if we're going to extract the nutrients from our food. It does need to undergo like a whole process in our stomach, of digestion.
Well, the other thing, and again, we've gotten a little bit away, but not really, from the initial topic, which had to do with these powerful, carotenoids and other antioxidants like vitamin E and others. But the point is that if we started out looking what it takes to make a healthy human being past the age of being able to be in sports, you know what I'm saying? That most nutrition and most of the the prescriptions for different types of workouts and that sort of thing, for most of the population, you're done when you get to middle school in terms of anybody giving a good rap about what you put in your body and how often you exercise. And that's really not how we're going to be taking care of an elderly population in the future. And if we really wanted to make a difference in terms of the incidence of macular degeneration or the incidence of lung cancer or the incidence of Alzheimer's or other dementia, and we talked about this a little bit with Hans, because back in the day, we called it hardening of the arteries. When I was a small boy, that was so and so, has hardening of the arteries, and is that why he's acting so strange? Yeah, he's old, and that's it. Okay, so how do you keep from getting hardening of the arteries? Well, I don't know. you know so now we've got a lot of different names for different sorts of things, and it turns out they're all kind of the same thing, and they could come from a really good method of training people to be responsible for and taking care of their own health from an early age. Here's
Absolutely.
what you need to eat, and here's what you need to consume, and here's why.
And here's why. And um, I mean, I think yeah, starting at a young age is kind of, I think, is crucial. I think because as I look at the elderly people I've been around, my dad, now my mom, there comes to be a certain point where you don't really want to where you want to do what's easy regarding food. And I
Right.
have to say that I know a number of my friends tell me about this, about their parents also, that food becomes much more about ease versus health. And so I feel like, if you have those habits when you're younger of eating healthy, you're likely to keep them when you get older. And I'm not saying it's just that you're tired. Like my mother says, I don't want to have to cook anymore. I'm tired, is her thing. So I guess the question is if you happen to, for people who are, let's say, in a facility, whether that be in assisted living, is how much are they paying attention to diet and nutrition for the people that they service, as far as in a place like that. Like it's a good question because I actually don't know. I
Well,
mean, and
wouldn't it be great if everybody had an annual checkup and they all got tested on the palm of their hand, to see what their carotid level is?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that was a real big draw for me to have it done was one is, that okay, I'm very into my health and I constantly make changes. And some of those changes the doctor has actually suggested. So, let's say increase your vitamin D levels or increase your omegas or whatever. But I do go to a functional medicine doctor, so it's a little different. I'm not just going to a regular GP.
Right.
But how often I make changes and then I don't see her for a year because
Right.
that's when I need more blood work. And so in the meantime, I've made those changes and I'm kind of like, I'm pretty good at sensing myself, but I'm like, are they helping? Are they not helping? Have my levels gone up? And so this is a concrete measurement. Like I measure myself every month. I mentioned I started really low, probably the lowest you can be generally, not lowest, but in the lowest category.
Sure.
And now I've moved myself up to probably 6 times what I was, 7
Wow.
times what I was over the past, like, year and a half, 2 years. I've worked really hard at it, and I tend to be very methodical. It's the scientist in me comes out. So first I was like, "Okay, let me try varying my diet." So I started adding in foods that were more colorful because I think we all get stuck in a rut, and we kind
Right.
of eat the same things all the time. I was like, "Okay, let me vary it." It went up a little bit. I said, "Okay, well, I'm gonna add in more healthy fats because they're fat soluble, and I'll see whether that goes up." And it went up. And then I said, okay, I'm going to add in omegas. And it went up a little bit more. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I plateaued. And then I was like, okay, what happens if I add in a supplement that's very high in carotenoids and see whether it goes up more? And now I've gone up that level. And so, you know, my attitude is it wasn't like I was like, okay, but some people take supplements because that's easy. They're like, oh, okay, I'll just take a supplement. And my attitude is if I could get it from nutrition, I'd rather start there. And I tried and I did go up, but not to a extent that I liked or I thought was good enough. And it wasn't even because I didn't feel well. I just thought, well, it sounds like it's a good place to be higher versus than lower. And from what
If
we're
one's
talking.
good, six has got to be real good, right?
Right, right. So I was like, okay, well, that means that, I have just more potential to whatever comes my way to be able to, to be able to, combat it or be able to stay as healthy as possible was my attitude.
So, question for you. Okay, I'm really intrigued by the skin test. Is this something that anyone can do, and how do they do it? What do you do on a monthly basis to get this done?
I actually have a scanner. I actually have a skin carotenoid scanner that I lease, and I do have people that come to me or clients that will ask to, and always, looking for more as far as more people I can help or make aware of their levels. But if people wanted to get a scan, I would say if they reach out to us through the podcast or something, we could find someone who has a handheld scanner in their area based on zip code or depending on where they are in the world.
Sure.
And you could pay for a scan. They vary in price depending on how much people charge. And It is something you can do, and I'm not saying maybe you don't do it monthly, but at least I would say quarterly, it's probably a good thing to do. I would say monthly is great. It takes about 3 weeks for what we consume
Yep.
to be deposited in the layer of skin we're measuring. So it's I always tell people, like, I go and I do kids sometimes and they're adorable because and they say, well, I drank, I ate carrots yesterday. And I'm like, sorry, those will, that doesn't work. It's not like a test you can cram for. So it's not like I can drink a half a, like a half a cup of carrot juice or a quarter carrot juice yesterday, and my carotenoids will go up today, at least not in your skin. So it's something that's looking like a picture of what was going on with you about 3 weeks ago. So if you
Gotcha.
make a change, it usually takes about a month for you to see that change.
Interesting.
So or more. So, I always tell people you got to give it a little time.
So I guess the question would be a little bit more about the scanner. I'm doing some looking right now. There's a Pharmanex bio
Yeah, that's the one
photonic
I have.
scanner.
Yeah, that's the one I have.
And what do these bad boys cost? I'm just curious.
Um, I don't know the list price offhand.
Right?
Um, I just know that, I really don't. I know I pay a leasing fee to
Right?
have one. I think it's not a thing that most households, let's say, are going to go out and invest in.
Right?
It's the kind of thing where maybe certain health practitioners, people in the optometrics, the eye field, ophthalmology or optometrists might have one because of the relevance to macular degeneration, which is pretty well accepted now. Um, my attitude is that fitness centers should have them, especially if people are health conscious anyway. It's a really nice measurement. I think it is a really nice measurement in addition to, and I'm not saying don't get the other blood parameters that you get done, cholesterol,
Right?
complete blood count, all that, the CBC and all that kind of stuff. Do that. It gives you different information. And really, this is just information. And it's information on how you're doing nutritionally and whether you're taking in enough antioxidants to cope with the lifestyle you have.
Yeah. And that's so important for people to even get that message, that you do have to replenish and you do have to keep bathing your cells, in antioxidants. It's not like, you can go and do one thing every few months and you're good. It's the nutritional part of it is that in addition to the other things that you're putting into your body, you really want to make sure that you're giving it every opportunity. There are different compounds. Are you familiar with isotonics products at all?
A little bit, not much, but I do know people. Yeah.
OPC3, OPC3, which has primarily, I think the active ingredient in is pycnogenol, which is a really, really great source of antioxidants, which I've been using and my wife's been using for over 10 years. So I think really, at this point, have we said enough about you can prevent a lot of the things that old people are going through right now because they weren't being prevented during the last 40 or 50 years, and now we've got more people, and how much of a strain do we want to put on our remediation systems when we could actually be doing a better job of having people be healthy and not be sick?
Absolutely. And I think we've said enough for now. Maybe what we can do is ask Hans to join us, maybe, and come on, and because that
Yeah.
might be fun, and just have another conversation about this important topic. But I think everything, it was interesting because I've always been very health conscious for, the past 15 years. But uh, when my dad got ill and was in rehab, and it was an experience I would never want anyone to relive,
Right.
to live through. And I saw the care he got and the strain it put on all of us. And I understand people who have to do that because I go into facilities all the time to teach and to spend time with people who are residents or who are living there. and people have different circumstances as far as, jobs and everything like that. But my attitude was everything I can do to never have to go into a place like that,
Yes.
I wanted to do because I didn't want to, he was miserable. I didn't want to be there. The We were miserable because he required more care than we were able to give him, by us, I mean. And so eventually, yes, we did bring him home with nurses or whatever, but financially that was straining too, obviously. So it's kind of like everything I can do that's within my power, I want to
Yeah.
do. I want to do. I don't want to be a burden like that. And also, like, I don't want to, like, the thought of, like, that was so hard for me to watch, the fact that he was so unhappy being there.
We actually went through a couple of episodes with my dad, and it's a different deal when somebody starts sliding in, down the dementia slide. It can be comedic, but it can also be very frustrating for everyone involved. Like my dad would sit there sometimes when he needed to have something like right now, and people were not able to perform or to get it for him. I can just remember him going, Marianne, I am not having any fun right now, and I mean, he said that, and so it's kind of like, I was always told, if you want to get even with your parents, grow up, have a miserable life, and then call them and tell them about it. Okay. And that's how you get even with your parents. But then again, when you're living through these types of circumstances with loved ones like your mom and your dad in their final days, and it's just not something any of us really wants to go through. So the whole notion of, can you slow down and stop what's happening with the degradation of the cellular structure in your body such that it has to do strange things because it's been overoxidized? Is there something we can do even at the age of 60 or 70? And I don't know that we can't say for sure either way. There may be some new research coming out in the next 4 or 5 years that says, by the way, we've got ways to make this reversible. But if we don't look and we don't do testing for it and we don't apply science, we'll never know, right?
Hmm. Yeah, no, we'll never know. And I think that, there is research out there now. People are researching. Um, and I think that there's a lot we don't know. But just, I always say, people, like, what can you do? Well, to the best of your ability, try to eat better. That's the first thing.
Yep.
Read labels, learn how to read labels, food labels, um, shop in the perimeter of the store, which is where all the food, like all the proteins are. So the meat, fish, chicken, and the vegetables and fruits are.
Whole Foods, yes.
Whole Foods, there's no reason to go through the center unless you need paper goods or something,
Right.
you know. And so do that. At least that's a great place to begin.
Yeah.
And I know you cook a lot, Bill. I cook a lot. Just cook. I mean, and we'll stop there. I think that's all I have to say to people.
I think it's fantastic. I want to acknowledge you for bringing this conversation into my life in a really powerful way. I'm looking forward to where we're going to go with this, and I am so grateful that you and Hans spent the time, bringing me up to speed on what's going on in the world that I would never have heard of otherwise. And it's not lost on me that the two of you gave me your undivided attention by holding my hand while I saw something that's very familiar to both of you. And I do appreciate that.
Oh, of course. And we're happy to do it. And I think that that's our mission, is to educate as many people as possible
Yeah.
and to empower people.
Yeah. And the old method of training the trainers, if you've got somebody in your life that is already pretty good at conveying messages to other people, why not give them better content for their message, right?
That's right. That's right. Absolutely.
Well, I love you and I appreciate you. And anything else that you want to say to kind of put a bow on this?
No, I don't think so. Maybe look into finding a place, reach out to us. And if you have any questions or want more information, even, that's a great place to start. But yeah, that's it.
Well, here's what you can do. And again, I am Bill Correll and Jan Jeremias, and we are lighting the candle, a world that works. And you can at least search us on Facebook. I'm going to probably be easier to identify than Jan because I have a ZZ Top kind of a beard. I'm playing a game to see how far I can make it go. But in the meantime, yes, we want to hear your questions. We want to, connect you with anybody that can make your life better. So again,
Absolutely.
thank you so much, Jan. Thank you, listeners. And we'll see you soon.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Bill.
Bye-bye now.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a World That Works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch every episode as well as the rest of the network at exvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.